So if you're watching this video, chances are you've watched other backpacking gear videos. This isn't the first one you've watched, and there's a good chance you probably feel gear guilt. In other words, you see all this stuff that these backpacking YouTubers are putting out there, and you're realizing, I don't have that kind of gear. I don't have the really nice stuff. Everything that I have is kind of cheap, and maybe I need to up my game. No, that's not the case. Today we're going to talk about 5 kinds of gear that it seems like everybody is using, but you really just don't need. The first type of gear I want to talk about is Dyneema composite fabric. You hear about people all the time having Dyneema tents, tarps, stuff sacks. Listen, I have that stuff. I don't have the tarp, I don't have the tent, but I definitely have stuff sacks, bear bags, electronics bags, things that use Dyneema. But don't think that because we're all using this stuff that that's something you have to have. Quite honestly, Dyneema is a great product. Let me give you some just positives about Dyneema gear. One, it's super strong. If you took the same weight of steel as Dyneema is 15 times stronger. So the tensile strength of Dyneema is off the charts. It's also extremely lightweight. You can get the same kind of tarp made in Dyneema that you would in a sil poly or a nylon, and it could weigh half as much. Not only that, it's extremely waterproof. Most of your fabrics are waterproof up to a certain point. I have yet to see Dyneema wet out. Now, I could be wrong on this, but I personally have never seen it happen. Also, it doesn't sag when it gets wet. Sil poly and nylon, when it gets wet, it gets into the fabric and it actually starts to sag a little bit, whereas Dyneema doesn't do that. So Dyneema has a lot of positives to it, but there's one huge negative when it comes to Dyneema. It's freaking expensive. If you take these 2 stuff sacks, this one made with Dyneema, this one made with a sil poly, the 2 together, the weight difference is 0.4 ounces. But this will cost you $35 and this will cost you $5. There's a huge difference in the cost. Because of everything this does, it comes at a premium price. Whereas you can buy these anywhere and it's not going to cost you nearly as much. So there's a huge difference between the cost of Dyneema and the cost of one of these polyester or nylon bags. Tents, tarps, I don't own either in Dyneema and I'm doing fine. Would I like to have a Dyneema tent? Yes, I would, as a matter of fact. And if Z-Packs or Gossamer Gear wants to throw one my way, tarp tent, I'm right here. You know, you can just send me one for free. I'm not gonna back off from that. I'm getting along just fine without it. I've been using sil poly tarps and tents for a long time, and they do a fantastic job, and they are still ultra light. If you're wanting to find lightweight gear, you can still do it and not have to spend that Dyneema price. So just because everybody's using Dyneema doesn't mean that you need to. Next up on the list is another piece of gear that I own, and that is a long-handled titanium spork. These things are great. This is a Toaks titanium long-handled spork. I've been using it for almost 2 years. It's got a polished bowl. It's a really, really nice piece of gear. And when you're using a Mountain House meal or a Peak Refuel or Stowaway Gourmet or whatever freeze-dried food you like, it's great because you can dip down in and you don't have to worry about getting your hands all gooed up with food. It really does a great job for that. But if you're somebody who's not spending premium money on your food and buying these huge bags of freeze-dried food that can cost anywhere from $7 to $15 for one meal, this is kind of overkill. It's unnecessary for what you're going to be eating. Instead, you could be getting something like this. This is the Yuko Spork. This can be bought at Walmart for about 10 bucks. This titanium spork, $14, $13.97. For the same thing, same weight, this weighs 0.6 ounces, this weighs 0.6 ounces. You can get something that costs a little bit less, takes up less room in your backpack, and actually has a real fork. And if you've watched any of my videos, when I've gone out with backpacking with Jason or with Jeremiah Stringer, a lot of times we like to have steaks. I've gotten to where I'll bring chicken or pork or something like that out into the backcountry with me, And having an actual fork is awesome. It's great having a spoon that doesn't have the ridges at the end, so everything actually comes up with the spoon, and it doesn't change the weight savings. If you don't want to spend $10 on one of these, Walmart actually sells one of these that's $3.97. It's made of nylon and it's like some kind of turquoise blue or something. But $3.97 as opposed to $13.97. That's a killer deal. It can save you some money. It actually saves space in your backpack, and you get all the same uses. If you're somebody who's making your food, you're actually making food and you're not using this big tall bag, there's no real need for a long-handled spork. Also, if you don't want to spend the money on a long-handled spork, go get a Blizzard at Dairy Queen and keep the spoon. Those things are really long and they work just as well. If you're just getting started and you're trying to be on a budget, this may not be the best option to start off with. Definitely check out something like this or its nylon counterpart, which will save you a ton of money. And really, you're looking at about the same weight. So there's nothing wrong with a spork, but this spork isn't necessarily what you need when you get started backpacking. For the last several years, it's been this mindset that when you start out backpacking, you're gonna get kind of a big name brand backpack to start with, probably like an Osprey with that awesome lifetime warranty, or a Gregory pack, or a Deuter, something like that that's gonna have an internal frame, it's gonna be a little more robust, it's gonna have all the bells and whistles on it, and then after using that for a while, you're gonna switch to something by an ultralight company, another framed pack, probably a ULA or a Z-Packs, or if you really wanna go into Cottage, you could do a Chicken Tramper backpack. And then the next natural progression is, you're gonna move from this framed ultralight pack to an even lighter pack that has no frame. We've been told this for the last several years, that this is kind of the natural progression of backpacking. Listen, that is not necessarily how it works. I personally am not crazy about frameless backpacks. This past year, I won a raffle and won a ULA CDT frameless backpack. I got all the bells and whistles. I did it up really nice, posted it online. People were commenting about how cool the pack looked. Everything was awesome. I got it loaded up for the first trip, and at the end of the trip, my shoulders were killing me. I couldn't get it packed quite right. It wasn't real comfortable, but I used it for several other trips after that. And after all those trips, I just came back thinking to myself, this isn't my thing. Truthfully, it might not be your thing either. To move to a frameless backpack, you have to get your base weight down a lot. Most of your frameless backpacks, you're looking at 15 to 18 pounds being kind of the standard for where you need to have your weight with food and water. That's not your base weight. That's all around weight of your pack if you're gonna go frameless. Now, there are some that the weight rating is a little higher, and there are some that the weight rating is actually lower than that. But for me, I have too many luxury items that I like to backpack with. And you may be the same way. I like carrying a chair with me. When I get to camp, I wanna sit in a chair. I don't wanna sit on a log. I don't wanna sit on a sit pad on the ground. I wanna sit on a chair. I wanna kick back. I wanna relax. I wanna enjoy it. I also have other luxury items I like. I like to bring in real food when I'm doing some of my trips. So I'll be bringing in a steak that may weigh a pound by itself when I go into the backcountry. If I'm gonna bring those things, a frameless pack is just not an option for me. And it may be the same for you. Just because you see that this is kind of the progression that other people do, it doesn't mean that's the progression for you. Some of us really like the framed backpacks better. One of the big positives of a framed backpack versus a frameless backpack is that you can actually shift the weight from your hips to your shoulders. You can actually move that weight around, so as your shoulders or your back start to get bothered a little bit, you can lower the weight down onto your hips, and when you start feeling like that's getting a little annoying, you can shift it back up. It's really nice to have that ability, but with a frameless pack, there's no frame giving you that ability to really move that weight around. It's really up to you on what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with frameless packs. There's nothing wrong with them at all. I've got a lot of friends who use frameless packs. But just because they're using it doesn't mean that I have to. And just because you see people online or in magazines or on TV shows using frameless backpacks, that doesn't mean that's what you have to do when you go out. You've probably heard of names like Outdoor Research, Mountain Hardware, Patagonia. These are great, well-known companies that are making quality gear. And sometimes we allow ourselves to think that we have to buy gear from big name brands, and the truth is we don't. You don't have to buy gear from big name brands to be able to enjoy the backcountry. There are so many ways that you can buy gear that's going to be awesome for you that you don't have to pay a premium price to get it. After this video's over, and I mean after the video's over, don't you dare turn this video off right now. Go check out Justin Outdoors. He does a phenomenal job of breaking down gear, finding high quality gear that a lot of times can be a little less expensive. And one of the companies that he's talked about is a company called Decathlon. Decathlon makes down jackets that can cost as much as a third of what your big name companies cost. That's incredible to be able to have quality gear that you don't have to break the bank for. Now, for a lot of us, we trust those names because they've been around for years and we know them. But if you're getting out into backpacking for the first time, you don't necessarily have the money to spend on these big name brands. Myself and Jeremiah Stringer, we joke around all the time about Patagonia being Patagucci. It's super nice gear. And then you move into gear companies like Arc'teryx, who made this sweatshirt I'm wearing right now. They're just expensive. The gear can be super expensive. And you don't have to buy those big name pieces of gear to be able to get out into the backcountry. If you look, a lot of backpacking YouTubers will put out a budget gear video, and the reason we do that is because we know that several people are wanting to get into backpacking, but the sheer cost of the gear can be mind-blowing and can make it look really daunting to get into backpacking. And so there are pieces of gear out there that you can get, whether it's jackets or hats or boots or shoes, backpacks, sleeping bags, whatever it is. There are options out there where you don't have to spend premium money to get really good gear. You can find great quality gear that doesn't carry the big name brand name on it and not pay nearly as much. Now, I trust those name brands. I think they're great companies, but if you're just getting started out, it is hard to buy all this expensive gear at the beginning. So it's wise to go out there and look for budget options that allow you the ability to at least get into the backcountry, and then as you go, replace that gear with the better gear, with the more expensive gear. The thing is, you don't need it to start off with, and you may find you don't want it. That is not my favorite flavor of that. Quick disclaimer before I talk about this last item. All of the things that you've been hearing about, I'm not telling you how to backpack, but what I am trying to give you the freedom of is deciding for yourself. Don't feel like just because you see these guys on YouTube talking about this stuff that you have to buy this kind of gear that they're using. Don't look at us YouTube people as the end-all be-all on what you should use when you go backpacking. This is a very personal thing when it comes to gear, so make sure the gear you pick out is gear that's going to work best for you. Don't worry about what I have to say. Don't worry about what Dan Becker has to say, or Jeremiah Stringer, or Darwin, or any of these guys. We are just telling you our experience and sharing from that, and hoping that we can help you kind of figure out yours along the way. So don't listen to this video and think that I'm dogging out any of this gear. I'm not. As a matter of fact, I'm using almost all of this gear that I'm talking about, or have used this gear. So it's up to you. Do what you want, and make sure you really do hike your own hike. This stuff tastes nasty. And the final thing we're going to talk about today is something that's kind of hard for me to talk about because I love it. It's something that I will always buy from these companies, but I've also been doing this for a while. So I'm replacing gear with this gear, and that's gear from Cottage companies. Now understand, I love Cottage gear, and I will tell you point blank, it's the best gear you can find. Cottage gear can be personalized and customized to whatever you want when it comes to colors, fabrics, the size of gear, the weight of gear. You get the opportunity to really dial it in to what you want. But if you're getting started in backpacking, you don't necessarily know what those things are and how to dial in your gear. And so buying custom gear from a Cottage company at the beginning is not a great idea. Even though you see all of these YouTubers buying this stuff, if you're just getting started out or you're having to backpack on a budget, you're best not buying from a Cottage company. And that's hard for me to say because I love these companies and I have friends who run these companies. But if you're running on a budget, if you're trying to save some money, if you're only going out 1 or 2 times a year, you don't want to spend $350 on a backpacking quilt. You don't want to spend $50 or $60 on a bear bag kit. You want to spend $150 on a sleeping bag, and you want to get a bear bag that maybe costs you $10 to $15. And that's okay. You don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of money on gear so that you can fit in the backcountry. The point of this entire video is that gear is very personal, and it's what works best for you. And for several people who go out in the backcountry, you meet up with them and you'll realize that everything they bought is from Walmart, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or when they buy custom gear or they buy big name gear, they buy it from secondhand websites, or they buy it from a flea market website on Facebook, or they get on the REI outlet. There's just so many ways you can buy gear less expensive. You don't have to break the bank in order to backpack. That's the whole point. Now, is that gear great? Absolutely. Is it worth the money? Yeah, it really is. But just because it's worth the money and it's good gear doesn't mean you have to have that gear to go backpacking. Make sure that when you get started backpacking, you get the gear you need and you get out there and you learn and you figure out what works best for you. I think I just had a tank drive by. Holy cow. I don't even know where I left off on that. When I first started backpacking, I was using a tent, and I swore I would always use a tent. And then I got my first hammock. And I've been hammock camping ever since. Remember that what you're doing now, you may not be doing a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So learn how you backpack before you spend huge amounts of money on gear that you simply don't need. If you enjoyed the video, give it the old thumbs up. If you didn't, give it the thumbs down. I'm cool with it. Doesn't bother me at all. And until next time, stay strong, hike long, and I'll catch you on the next go-around.